you'll have me shivering in my underwear. Come along, Mackinaw. We will be just in time to be fashionably late.
I should like to help everyone if possible. Jew, Gentile, black man, white.
They dazzled on red carpets and lit up the silver screen. But when the spotlight faded, some of Hollywood's golden age legends took their final bow in places no scriptwriter could have imagined. Far from the glitz of Hollywood hills or the manicured lawns of celebrity cemeteries, these stars found eternal rest in locations as bizarre as they are baffling. From stolen remains to secret burials, each story unravels a chilling epilogue to fame. This isn't just Hollywood history. It's the ultimate final act in a life of drama. Groucho Marks. The final joke no one saw coming. Born Julius Henry Marks. In New York City in 1890, Groucho Marks wasn't just a comedian. He was a revolution in eyebrows, wit, and timing. With a painted mustache, a trademark cigar, and a voice that could slice through silence like a one-liner through awkward pause, Groucho led the Marx Brothers into the heart of Broadway, and later, straight into Hollywood stardom. He didn't just tell jokes, he was the joke, in the best possible way. When he died in 1977, fans might have expected a grand, marble-covered monument somewhere in the Hollywood Hills, maybe a statue with Groucho's unmistakable glasses and smirk. But in classic Groucho fashion, he chose something far less expected. His ashes were placed in a modest niche at Eden Memorial Park in San Fernando, California, a quiet cemetery with none of the glitter usually reserved for Hollywood legends. There's no golden plaque, no oversized tribute, just a simple marker with a punchline that would make even the dead chuckle. "Excuse me, I can't stand up." Only Groucho could turn his epitaph into a business proposition. What makes it even more surreal is how understated it all is. No spotlights, no velvet ropes, just fans who show up, quietly, reverently, leaving coins, notes, or even toy cigars. His resting place isn't flashy, but it's exactly the kind of final act he would have written himself. Low-key, clever, and dripping with irony. During his life, Groucho never played by the rules. On his popular radio and television show, You Bet Your Life, he improvised his way through interviews, throwing zingers faster than his guests could blink. One of his most famous quips? "I never forget a face, but in your case, I'll be glad to make an exception." But what if the next star's final resting place defies everything you thought you knew? Stay tuned to find out. Charlie Chaplin. The Great Robbery After the Final Curtain. Charlie Chaplin, beloved worldwide as the silent film icon known as the Little Tramp, spent his final years in serene exile, far from the Hollywood chaos he helped shape. He passed away peacefully on Christmas Day, 1977, in the small village of Corsier-sur-Vevey, Switzerland. Just days later, he was buried in the quiet Goss cemetery nearby. But what happened next was anything but peaceful. On the morning of March 2nd, 1978, cemetery workers made a chilling discovery. Chaplin's grave had been disturbed, and his entire oak coffin was gone. No signs of mess or vandalism, just a neatly emptied grave. It was too clean, too calculated. This was no prank. Swiss police immediately suspected professionals. Then the phone calls started. Una Chaplin, Charlie's widow, received a series of disturbing messages. The caller demanded $600,000, about $2.5 million today, threatening to damage the body if the ransom wasn't paid. Even more disturbing, they had photos to prove they had taken Chaplin's remains. But Una, composed and clever, didn't give in. Instead, she worked closely with investigators who tapped their phone lines and quietly monitored hundreds of phone booths across the region. Weeks passed with no break. The family endured unbearable uncertainty, knowing Charlie's body was in the hands of criminals. Then finally, a clue cracked the case. The calls were traced back to Roman Wardas, a Polish mechanic, and his accomplice, Gancho Ganev. Both were immigrants in financial trouble who believed Chaplin's wealthy family would easily pay to recover his remains. On May 17, 1978, nearly 3 months after the theft, police found Chaplin's coffin buried in a cornfield just 10 miles away. He was reburied in the same Swiss cemetery, this time beneath a thick layer of concrete to prevent further tampering. His grave appears modest today, but beneath the soil lies one of the most bizarre true crime episodes in Hollywood history. But what if the next star's story takes a darker, completely unexpected turn? Keep watching to uncover the twist. Marlene Dietrich, a star, torn between two graves. Marlene Dietrich, glamorous, defiant, and unforgettable, was more than a silver screen legend. She was a woman divided by identity, history, and loyalty. Born in Berlin in 1901, she rose to fame as a sultry icon of 1930s cinema, later becoming a proud American citizen and an outspoken critic of Nazi Germany. When she died in Paris on May 6, 1992, at age 90, the question wasn't just how she'd be remembered, but where she truly belonged. Despite publicly vowing never to return to her native Germany, it was Berlin that ultimately claimed her remains. Her daughter, Maria Riva, made the controversial decision to bury her in the German capital, citing what she believed were her mother's final wishes. And so, on May 16, 1992, Dietrich's body was flown from Paris to Berlin, where a funeral was held, attended by international dignitaries and Hollywood royalty. But her final resting place wasn't what many expected. Instead of a grand central cemetery befitting her legacy, this quiet cemetery, largely unknown to tourists, was the final resting place of 3 generations of her family. Yet the choice was also strategic. German officials feared that vandals might target a more visible grave due to her anti-Nazi activism. Even in death, her contradictions endured. In her will, Dietrich gifted much of her estate, costumes, photos, and film memorabilia to Berlin's Film Museum, but with one condition: they could only be displayed after German reunification. Meanwhile, back in Paris, where she had lived her final years in seclusion, an unofficial shrine sprang up at her apartment at 12 Avenue Montaigne. Fans still visit to leave flowers and notes, turning the spot into a second, spiritual grave. One body, 2 cities, her legacy as divided as her life. But what if the next legend's final chapter challenges everything you thought you knew about fame? You won't want to miss this. Charles Bronson, the tough guy's gentle goodbye. Charles Bronson, the steely-eyed face of cinematic justice, was the kind of actor who didn't just play tough, he defined it. Known for gritty roles in films like Death Wish and The Magnificent Seven, Bronson spent decades portraying silent, rugged men who took the law into their own hands. But when he died on August 30, 2003, at the age of 81, the man who symbolized revenge on screen chose a surprisingly quiet and remote final resting place. Far from the spotlight of Los Angeles, Bronson was laid to rest in Brownsville Cemetery, tucked away in the small town of West Windsor, Vermont. No grand mausoleum, no marble statues, just a modest headstone in a tranquil field, surrounded by trees and mountain air. Born Charles Bukinski in Ehrenfeld, Pennsylvania, in 1921 to Lithuanian immigrant parents, Bronson's early life was tough. He worked in coal mines as a teenager and later served with honor in the Second World War, earning a Purple Heart.
It's not populated with too many people, too many characters. And it was...
After the war, he changed his name to avoid Hollywood's anti-communist blacklist and slowly carved a niche for himself in a cutthroat industry. Despite his hardened screen image, Bronson was intensely private. He married 3 times, fathered several children, and avoided Hollywood's glitz whenever possible. Vermont offered him what fame could not. His grave reflects that same simplicity. No signs are pointing to it. No gold lettering or cinematic references, just his name, his dates, and the soft rustle of leaves in the wind. Visitors looking for the man behind the myth often stumble across the site by accident and are struck by how humble it is. A quiet goodbye from a man who spent a lifetime speaking volumes without saying much at all. But what if the next star's farewell was the exact opposite? Quiet, remote, and almost forgotten. Stay glued to discover more. John Barrymore, The Borrowed Grave, and a final Hollywood prank. John Barrymore, famously nicknamed the Great Profile, lived a life as dramatic and unpredictable as any character he portrayed on stage or screen. But it's what happened after his death in May 1942 that turned his final chapter into one of Hollywood's most bizarre and enduring legends. Barrymore died in Los Angeles at the age of 60 from complications related to cirrhosis and pneumonia. His body was prepared for a traditional funeral at the Pierce Brothers mortuary, with plans to be buried in his family's plot at Calvary Cemetery in Philadelphia, where generations of Barrymores had been laid to rest. But according to long-standing Hollywood lore, as the story goes, Walsh bribed mortuary staff to borrow Barrymore's body before the official burial. They reportedly transported the corpse to Flynn's residence, where they propped it up in a chair and toasted to their late friend over a night of drinks and laughter, supposedly even including him in a poker game. Though some dismiss the tale as exaggerated or entirely fictional, Flynn himself hinted at the event in his autobiography, though with fewer details. Over the years, enough insiders swore by the story that it became an inseparable piece of Barrymore's posthumous myth. But the oddities didn't end there. Though initially buried in Calvary Cemetery, Barrymore's remains were moved in 1980 by his son, John Drew Barrymore, to Mount Vernon Cemetery, also in Philadelphia. The move was meant to honor his father with a more fitting tribute, one marked by a grander monument. For years, whispers persisted that Barrymore's body had never actually made it to either grave, and that he'd been cremated after the prank. Official records eventually disproved that, but the rumors and the wild story remain, casting a strange, humorous, and haunting shadow over one of Golden Age Hollywood's most unforgettable figures. But what if the next star's final chapter was more outrageous than any role they ever played? Stay tuned to find out. Martha Raye, the comedian buried like a soldier. Martha Raye, the loud, lively comedian with the mile-wide grin, made America laugh on screen. But it was her off-screen life that earned her a burial spot unlike any other in Hollywood history. Known as the Big Mouth, Raye lit up screwball comedies in the 1930s and 40s. But she was also a tireless USO performer, traveling deep into war zones to bring laughter to troops fighting in the Second World War, Korea, and Vietnam. Born in Montana in 1916, Raye was more than just a funny woman with perfect timing. She was a soldier at heart. She didn't just visit bases, she went to the front lines. She didn't just pose with troops, she trained as a nurse and treated the wounded. Her devotion went so far that both the U.S. Army and Marine Corps made her an honorary lieutenant colonel. And that deep military bond explains the shocking location of her final resting place. When she passed away in October 1994, Raye's family carried out her unusual final wish, to be buried at the Fort Bragg Main Post Cemetery in North Carolina. It's a sacred ground, normally reserved for U.S. Army, Special Forces soldiers. Yet Raye, a civilian, was granted a rare exception. She is the only civilian woman buried there. Her headstone is simple and understated, nestled near the Special Forces Chapel, and decorated by visitors with coins, flowers, and handwritten thank you notes. She was given full military honors at her funeral, as if she had worn a uniform all her life. In truth, she did, in spirit. Martha Raye once said she'd rather be remembered for making GIs laugh than for her movies. That grave at Fort Bragg says it all. She didn't just serve her country, she's buried with it. But what makes this Hollywood legend's final resting place so unlike anything you've seen before? Stay tuned to find out. Forever in the Cape, Bela Lugosi's final role. In life, Bela Lugosi was Count Dracula. In death, he remained so, literally. When the legendary actor died of a heart attack on August 16, 1956, at the age of 73, his most iconic role followed him beyond the grave, in a way that continues to fascinate horror fans and Hollywood historians alike. Once celebrated for his chilling performance in Universal's 1931 classic Dracula, Lugosi's later years were marked by hardship, typecast, struggling with addiction, and nearly penniless. The former star faded into obscurity, a shadow of the monster he once brought to life on screen.
For one who has not lived even a single lifetime.
But despite a career steeped in frustration, his family made a decision that would link him to his most famous character forever. They chose to bury him wearing one of the original Dracula capes. Though often assumed to be Lugosi's request, it was his family's idea, a symbolic gesture honoring the role that had both made and unmade him. Whether the cape was the actual one used in the 1931 film or later copy remains debated, but his son and several biographers insist it was authentic. Regardless, the decision meant that a tangible piece of Hollywood history was buried with its most haunting icon. Even more curious is the location of Lugosi's grave, Holy Cross Cemetery in Culver City, a quiet Catholic site far removed from the grandeur typically associated with movie legends.
Well, have you ever been interested in anything outside of your profession?
Oh, yes, very much. I like to model, to sculpture.
There, beneath a simple marker, the man behind Dracula was laid to rest, not in the company of industry elites, but surrounded by hundreds of devoted fans. At his funeral, few Hollywood stars appeared, but a striking sight filled the cemetery. Mourners, donning vampire capes, silently honoring the man whose image had shaped horror for generations. But what drove these famous stars to choose such shockingly strange final resting places? Stick around to uncover the surprising truth.
A most distinguished scientist, whose name we know, even in the wild of Transylvania.
Jane Mansfield, the pink heart that refused to fade. Jane Mansfield's life was one of dazzling fame, daring ambition, and undeniable charisma. But it's her final resting place that truly captures the spirit of the Hollywood blonde bombshell, whose legacy refuses to dim. When Mansfield died in a brutal car crash on June 29, 1967, at just 34 years old, the news sent shockwaves through Hollywood. Myths about the accident spread quickly, including the widely debunked claim that she had been decapitated. The truth was tragic enough. Massive injuries, a shattered vehicle, and a life cut short on U.S. Route 90 near Slidell, Louisiana. After the autopsy, Jane's body wasn't sent to Hollywood, where she had become a star. Instead, she was buried in Fairview Cemetery in Pen Argyl, Pennsylvania, the quiet hometown of her childhood. And yet, even in this conservative small town, her grave refuses to be ordinary. It's marked by a large pink, heart-shaped stone, a bold tribute that mirrors her vibrant screen persona, carved with her birth name, Vera Jane Palmer, and the words, "We live to love you more each day."
Oh, Gervaise.
It was very good. And also the new J. Arthur Rank film, A Town Like Alice.
The monument has become a magnet for fans from all over the world. But the story doesn't stop there. Visitors have long reported eerie experiences, catching the scent of her perfume, hearing whispers, or seeing the fleeting figure of a blonde woman near the grave. These unexplained moments have turned her burial site into a favorite stop for paranormal investigators. Meanwhile, far from Pennsylvania, the site of her crash in Louisiana became a de facto memorial. Fans began leaving flowers and notes, and eventually, a roadside marker was added to acknowledge her cultural impact.
No, that isn't true. I have a wonderful time and meet a lot of people.
Despite the quiet graveyard, Mansfield's memory pulses through decades, undimmed by time or distance and surrounded by mystery. But what drove these Hollywood legends to choose the most bizarre burial spots on Earth? Stay tuned to find out. Steve McQueen, The Skyward Farewell. When Steve McQueen, often called the King of Cool, passed away on November 7, 1980, from complications related to mesothelioma, the world mourned the loss of a Hollywood icon. Known for his fearless, rebellious spirit and unforgettable roles in films like Bullitt and The Great Escape, McQueen was never one to follow the crowd, and in death, he remained as unconventional as ever. While Hollywood expected him to be laid to rest among the elite at Forest Lawn or another grand cemetery, McQueen had other ideas. He didn't want marble statues or crowds of tourists snapping photos. Instead, he asked for something quieter, freer, something that matched the man he truly was behind the fame. Just one day after his death, his body was cremated, and from there, a truly extraordinary journey began. Rather than choosing a spot on Earth, McQueen chose the sky and the sea. His ashes were scattered off the coast of Santa Paula, California, not from a ship or a beach, but from high above, released from a vintage, in the Second World War, Steer-Man biplane. The pilot, his close friend Sammy Mason, a fellow aviator who had once trained McQueen in advanced flying. As the biplane soared into the California sky, McQueen's remains were cast into the wind, merging with the Pacific Ocean below. What makes this final tribute even more remarkable is that no gravestone was ever placed to mark the occasion. McQueen had no interest in turning his farewell into a Hollywood attraction, but fans, being fans, didn't forget. Over time, they created an unofficial memorial at the hangar where he kept his beloved aircraft, leaving behind model cars, leather jackets, and photographs, tiny symbols of admiration.
Now, what went wrong, Lieutenant?
Who else knew where he was?
What?
Then, in 2012, more than 3 decades after his passing, aviation enthusiasts and devoted fans raised funds to install a small, elegant monument near Santa Paula Airport. The inscription reads, Steve McQueen, 1930 to 1980. The spirit lives on. A quiet message for a man who always kept the noise at bay. Even today, devoted admirers occasionally take to the skies, chartering flights that retrace the route his ashes traveled.
You believe what you want. You work your side of the street, and I'll work mine.
There are no flowers to lay or plaques to polish, just a silent salute offered from the same sky he loved, drifting over the ocean where his final chapter began. Jean Harlow. The star, sealed in marble and mystery. When Jean Harlow, the dazzling original blonde bombshell, died suddenly in June 1937 at just 26 years old, the world was stunned. Known for her sharp wit, platinum curls, and magnetic screen presence in films like Red Dust and Dinner at 8, Harlow was Hollywood's golden girl.
I hope this puts that Bradley where he belongs.
So do I.
Yes, and I...
But her unexpected death from kidney failure was only the beginning of a story that grew stranger with time. Instead of a traditional gravesite, Harlow's grieving mother, Jean Bellow, known famously as Mama Jean, chose something far more elaborate. At Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale, California, she purchased an opulent private crypt inside the Great Mausoleum. Not just a burial plot, but it wasn't just the location that stood out. It was the intense layers of protection. Harlow's body was placed inside a bronze casket, costing a staggering $5,000 at the time, equivalent to nearly $95,000 today.
And will Mr. Madison make a large bet with that Bradley?
They're gonna have to break him.
That casket was then sealed within a white marble sarcophagus, and the sarcophagus was locked behind the mausoleum's thick walls. 3 barriers stood between Harlow and the outside world. Yet Mama Jean's devotion didn't stop there. She set up a special trust fund to ensure Harlow's private room would be filled with fresh flowers forever. Though no visitors were ever allowed into the chamber after her daughter's entombment, Forest Lawn staff faithfully maintained the arrangement, routinely swapping out the bouquets that no one would ever see. The mystery deepened when Mama Jean added a strict rule. No one, not even family, could step inside the chamber again. Only the caretaker assigned to the flowers. This left Harlow entombed in near total secrecy, hidden from the world in life and in death. Adding to the intrigue, the inscription on her tomb makes no mention of her stardom. Instead of Jean Harlow, the name reads Harleyan Carpenter, her birth name, and includes the words, "Our Baby," chosen by Mama Jean. There is no sign of her fame, her films, or her Hollywood legacy. In death, her mother stripped away the screen persona and left only the daughter she had known. When Mama Jean died in 1958, she was briefly entombed beside Harlow, but in an unexpected twist, Harlow's stepfather had her remains moved elsewhere in Forest Lawn. Harlow remains alone in the chamber to this day. Visitors can still view the exterior wall of the private room, but no one has entered it since 1937. The floral tradition continues, now maintained by cemetery staff, though the original trust has long since run out. Whispers persist among fans and film historians that she was buried in a blue satin gown with a note from her lover, actor William Powell, resting on her heart, but no one can say for sure. The truth lies sealed in marble, hidden behind layers of love, grief, and mystery. So, which of the above Golden Age stars' burials did you find the most bizarre? We'd like to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe for more.